Okay, hi everyone. I hope everybody is comfortable and ready to get into this astrology lesson or conversation. Um, so, my name is Urusha Jimenez, and I am an astrologer. And I'm super excited to be talking about today's topic, which is probably one of my favorite um, topics in astrology. And this is basically all about Chiron. So essentially, I personally feel like Chiron is one of the most important parts of our astrological chart. And in astrology, whenever I'm looking at a birth chart, there's always what I like to call keys. And basically, the way that I see these certain astrological fixtures that I see as keys, I see these parts of the chart as being keys that open and unlock the birth chart. So for me, Chiron is like a game changer when it comes to that. So I'm going to talk about Chiron, and I'm going to get into really like the depth of what this is all about in a birth chart. So let's begin. Okay. So as you can see, as I just said, Chiron is the key to the castle, the key that unlocks and activates our cosmic blueprint, also known as the birth chart or soul map. This is undoubtedly one of the most important parts of our natal chart. Okay. Chiron, essentially, really what Chiron is about, when we start to work with Chiron on a conscious and subconscious level, Chiron is turning poison into medicine. It's turning our wounds into medicine. And when we start to understand that Chiron is both poison and medicine at the same time, we can kind of really understand how important and transformational it is to start working with this part of our birth chart. I also want to say that Chiron is the deepest part of the birth chart. It's what is at the bottom of the soul. It's what is at the bottom of the ocean. It doesn't only come from this lifetime. Chiron can literally come from our ancestors, from our past lives, from like generation after generation, from our parents. And it's something that I believe we choose to work with in this lifetime. Okay. So Chiron is an asteroid that was discovered in 1977, and it orbits between Saturn and Uranus. Okay, this is really important because this is really symbolic. It does actually orbit between Saturn and Uranus in space, but on an astrology level, Saturn represents our lessons. It represents what we're here to master. And the way that Saturn gets us to master these lessons are through suffering, limitations. It's an energy of pessimism almost. Saturn is known as a planet that can make us be more self-critical wherever it's positioned in our chart, or more pessimistic. It doesn't ever block, but it doesn't ever deny, but it blocks. And the reason why it blocks is because Saturn wants to push us to fight for what Saturn is holding away from us, in a sense, because whatever Saturn is restricting or in a sense taking away from us is really where we have the most mastery, is where we can really become like a master of what Saturn is talking about. So yes, Saturn has this reputation of being a more pessimistic, darker energy. And so Chiron is orbiting between that Saturn experience, but then it's also orbiting between the Uranus experience. And Uranus is like a completely different energy than Saturn. Uranus is the awakening, it's the opening of the eyes, it's breaking free. It's about seeking that liberation, it's that rebel energy, it's a higher consciousness. So Chiron is literally in our charts. It is the energy of the Saturn experience and the Uranus experience. And Saturn and Uranus are not working against each other, they're working together. And so that's kind of how the Chiron experience is felt for us on a personal level. All right. So the mythology really talks about what Chiron is about. It's amazing how it completely mirrors what it means in the birth chart. So let's talk about the mythology of Chiron. So Kronos, Saturn, was Chiron's father, and Philyra, a nymph goddess, was his mother. Saturn, essentially, we spoke about Saturn being more of this pessimistic, fear-based sort of planet and energy. But in Greek mythology, Kronos or Saturn was a bit of a tyrant and would eat any of its children with the fear that his own children would take over and rule, the empire that he had. Now, one day he was out and about and he saw Philyra, the nymph goddess, the mother of Chiron, and he thought that she was beautiful and he wanted to basically mate with her, and she wanted nothing to do with him. So essentially, for her own protection, she changed herself into a mare, so he wouldn't know that it was her. But Saturn knew that it was Philyra, and he essentially raped her. And that is how Chiron came about. That's how Chiron was born. So when Kronos saw Chiron, when Saturn saw Chiron, he wanted to kill him because he didn't want him to overtake his power. And Philyra wanted nothing to do with him. She thought he was disgusting. He was half human, half centaur. She was sickened by him because he reminded her of Saturn, and she also thought he was like that there was something wrong really with him physically. So both Kronos and Philyra abandoned Chiron, and so as a child he was orphaned by both his mother and his father. The myth goes basically that Apollo, the god of enlightenment and the god of knowledge and medicine, took Chiron in and fathered him and taught him all about the healing arts, astrology, poetry, philosophy, how to use a bow and arrow, how to survive. He taught him about music and literature, and he really opened up his mind. So Chiron essentially turned into a master healer, a master philosopher, a master teacher, and he began to heal other centers and other people in the land. And he was known as a very prominent healer. So at one point in this story, Chiron is living his life and he accidentally gets hit by a poison arrow from Hercules. And this causes him to have a wound that ends up being the deepest wound he's ever had. And that wound essentially cannot be healed. He's not able to heal that wound. He does everything he can to try to heal it, but he just can't heal it. And Chiron eventually goes to the different Greek gods and begs to let him be mortal so he can die and be free of this wound. And Chiron essentially is made into a mortal being, and he soon dies after he is made a regular human being. Okay. So there's a lot of symbology in this myth and in this story, and it's going to come up more as I speak about it. But if we look at the aspect of Chiron that wasn't able to heal himself, that was limited in getting rid of that pain, that was limited in healing himself and freeing himself, we can look at that as being that Saturn energy, right? And he tried so hard throughout his life to heal himself. He did everything he could. And finally, there was that one thing that he knew if he did it, he would essentially free that pain. And that was to die, and become a mortal human being. And that is the Uranus energy. Because if we look at it symbolically, really what Chiron did was, with that Uranus energy, is it set him free. It broke him free from that Saturnian pain that he went through. So the reason why Chiron is so important in our birth charts is that Chiron is the key to unlocking your gifts through emotions and through physical healing. Chiron is not only emotional wounds, it can be physical wounds as well in the birth chart. So I have seen people who have certain physical ailments, and that shows up in their Chiron. Wherever our Chiron is, the house placement, the sign placement, we have our greatest gift there. That is our goal. That is our medicine. But we really, really have to kind of go down into the shadows in order to find that and claim that and heal that. So wherever the house placement is, it's going to show us where the wound is acting out. So, for example, if it's in the first house, which is the house of the self, the identity, that wound, that Chiron wound, can be acting out in how we see ourselves, how we treat ourselves, how we show up with other people. Do we know how to nurture ourselves? Do we feel good about ourselves? Is our self-esteem high or is it low? And the sign shows us how to heal it. It's the energy that was missing, that we didn't get, or was splintered, that we can use to heal it. So if your Chiron, again, is in that first house of self in the sign of Taurus, Taurus is going to be all about self-worth and literally like the senses and nurturing the body. And there's a lot more to it as well, but this is just an example. So through Chiron, it's really the gateway through the lower to higher states of consciousness. When we begin to work with our Chiron, we start to move up on that higher consciousness level. So what does it represent in a birth chart? Well, as I said before, it represents our greatest gift that is residing in our wound, our deepest wound. It has to do with shame, trauma, our shadow. Our unhealthy subconscious programming is huge because Chiron lives very much in the shadow. Any feelings of unworthiness, any feelings of deep fears and insecurities. And the most important thing, really, Chiron is our wounded child. And it's our wounded inner child. And so if we look at how Chiron was abandoned as a child, that unworthiness, that undeservingness, that rejection is really what Chiron represents in the chart. And so in order to really work with Chiron, we have to understand that not only is it something that we have to heal throughout this lifetime, but it also shows us how we can help other people heal when we start working on this path of healing our Chiron. So Chiron shows us what we need to heal and how we need to heal ourselves. And in the natal chart, it shows that our wound is really a gift to ourselves and to others. The wound that we have is the thing that we can help humanity with, and that's why we have it. Should we take the taking and the responsibility of choosing to work with this aspect of ourselves? Lots of people do, and lots of people can't, and they don't want to. It's too confronting. So, as I said before, the root of Chiron is that it is directly connected to our inner child. This is basically, as I said before, the symbol of Chiron being abandoned by both his parents. So when we start to do the Chiron work, we're really starting to work with our own inner child wounds, and through looking at the chart, that can show us what we didn't receive as a child, what we didn't get. Areas in our chart that are splintered literally can be the story of our own inner child roots and what we need to give our inner child as an adult. Sorry, just trying to. Okay. Ultimately, what is working with our Chiron? Like, what is it? Basically, Chiron, when you begin to work with your Chiron, it's showing you how to reparent yourself. When you work with your Chiron, you are reparenting yourself. That's why this is the deepest work you can do. You can't get any deeper than this. And it's very painful, it's very emotional. But the areas in your chart are going to show you what your inner child needs emotionally, mentally, and physically. And you probably already innately know this because it's what you struggle with. But this allows you to begin the process of consciously integrating the part of you that is capable of taking care of the aspect of you that did not have the support it needed originally. So you therefore become the provider of your inner child. So what it is that you didn't get, you become the one that gives that to yourself. And that's the integration. Okay. Chiron is shadow work. It is what we have a very hard time looking at. It's what we have a very hard time confronting. It's a lot of the times what we don't see about ourselves, not only about ourselves, what we don't see about our caretakers, our parents. It's the things that we suppressed and we forgot, memories that we forgot that we didn't think happened, but happened. So working with Chiron is a deep dive into the subconscious. It's a deep dive into meeting the parts of ourselves that were rejected, abandoned, shamed, and unowned by others, as well as ourselves. And this is also known as what the shadow is. In addition, there's a lot of subconscious programming that needs to be reprogrammed when you start working with your Chiron. Like, as you start working with that aspect of your chart, you will have a lot of that come up, those subconscious programs. And it's really sort of very empowering to be able to reprogram them and sort of rewrite the script of what your subconscious inner child took in and what's literally running your life. And that's the thing. Chiron, if it's not healed, if it's not looked at, if it's ignored, it's running our lives and we don't even know it. Once you start working with Chiron, this very interesting thing happens. It's almost like the universe sort of opens up and is like, okay, you want to do this. It's you're really activating your birth chart. And you get a lot of opportunities and experiences to sort of wake up that area of your chart. But as I said before, working with Chiron is an ongoing process. It's something that you do your entire life. When you start to work with this part of healing in your chart, it's really amazing how things in your own life begin to open up for you. And that's really because you are going directly to the subconscious, and the subconscious rules about 90% of our consciousness. We're only operating at 10% on a conscious level. So the subconscious is drawing things to us that we don't even know we're drawing to us. Anyway, this is the process. That's really what I'm trying to say. And it's really, really worth going through the process of doing this work. It's also a commitment. It's also an understanding that you're recommitting to yourself and that it's not easy. One thing with Chiron that I've noticed in my personal experience is I can go through times where I'm really, really actively working on it and dealing with it because, I'm being confronted with things. And then there are times where I'm comfortable and nothing's happened. But ultimately, working with your Chiron requires great commitment. And there's great rewards in committing to this process of kind of breaking free from that thing that was restricting you, from all those behaviors, unconscious behaviors and relationships and situations that you keep finding yourself in. So you're basically like breaking the cord. You're cutting. You're segregating yourself from that pattern that has been running the show. Chiron is in the chart is not only about your wounding. It's also about the journey of self-integration. So as you keep going on this healing journey, you start to almost awaken to different parts of yourself. The shadow and the light come together, and they unify. They integrate. It is what we are here to master, essentially, self-integration. So when we do this, the deepest wound becomes our gift. And why does it become our gift? Because it's kind of like Neo in the Matrix. It's like all of a sudden when he's able to get in front of those bullets and just like sideswipe them because he's integrated with himself. And again, Chiron being really at the depth of the birth chart, it's like we're activating that foundation of the birth chart when we're doing this. And the greatest thing is that we can help and teach others in regards to the Chiron placement, which I mentioned. So just to recap, houses are going to show you where your Chiron's playing out. It's literally going to show you where you need to focus on. So whether that's the self or relationships or the home or the family, there's something, the house will show you. It will give you, it will speak that code to you. The sign shows the energy that was missing to us. It's an energy that is incredibly important for our growth, but it's an energy that was somehow splintered. And now we can give that back to ourselves. So we can figure out through that sign how to literally give that back to our inner child. So I'll just give a quick example. If your Chiron was in the sign of Leo, Leo is all about, well, Leo is the inner child, but Leo is about the ego. It's about self-esteem. It's about your self-confidence. It's about being seen. It's about being expressed. And when you know that that energy has somehow been splintered, you can, begin to reparent your own inner child and give your inner child that energy back. You can do that through in a subconscious way. You can do that in a conscious way. You can start to give that back to yourself. And again, that's going to activate your birth chart. One thing about people who have really strong aspects of Chiron in their charts are almost always some sort of healer. And healer, it doesn't mean that it has to just be like an emotional healer. I've seen really strong Chiron aspects in doctors' charts, in surgeons' charts. Often they are in the charts of therapists, psychologists, gurus, shamans, teachers. What makes somebody have a strong Chiron placement? I mean, if Chiron is aspecting your sun or conjuncting your sun or your ascendant or your moon, any of those personal planets, if Chiron is making aspects to your north node, you're meant, you came here to heal this. You came here to master this. That's not even a question. If Chiron's on your ascendant, for example, your first house, you are the wounded healer. You are that. Something very common with people with strong Chiron aspects in their chart is that they often go through a lot of suffering. And that is because it's kind of like, that's how they become the wounded healer. That's how they activate that Chiron, through that suffering. So yes, so it is very common to see this placement with people who are healers in some way, or who are teachers, or who are here to hold space for others or help other people. Okay. So what starts to happen when we really start to do the work? Because we're not always, when we're doing this Chiron, when we're working with our Chiron, and I also want to, also add something that a lot of times what propels us to work towards that are actual transits on our Chiron. So we can have like a disruptive transit on our Chiron, and it just kind of be the floodgates for all of this stuff that we thought we were done with healing, and we just weren't doing that anymore, and it just brings it up. And so we're forced to do that. So very often, a lot of times when people really start going towards that path of healing, they have some sort of transit with Chiron that's happened. So what are the benefits of working with Chiron? Well, first of all, it's an incredible transformation, personal transformation in your sense of self, in your relationships, in your life, and how you do things and how you view things, the way you think. It's an incredible aspect of spiritual growth. So you're really up leveling when you're taking this role. Obviously, it's a deep, deep healing. When you start to work with your Chiron, you begin to awaken to who you really are, and not who you think you are, not who other people think you are. It's like a new self. It's like you're awakening to gifts and parts of yourself that you didn't even know. So you're awakening to who you really are. And that's because you're integrating. So it's the integration of the mind, body, soul. The role of Chiron is to unlock the chains that bind you. And that's that whole Saturn-Uranus orbit. And Chiron stays in that orbit. The minute that Chiron leaves that orbit, it's not an asteroid anymore. So that's pretty interesting as well. Transgenerational healing. When you're doing this work, you're not only just healing yourself, you're healing your lineage, your ancestors. There's a change that happens in the family around you. And also, it is an awakening to your hidden gifts and calling. They also say when you start to work on your Chiron, there are gifts that you don't even know you have. And it's sort of like, because you've done this healing, you're ready for them. You're ready to step into being able to master something or have access to a gift that you couldn't have done if you were still in the shadows or unconscious. Okay, and this is just a quote, that only the wounded healer can truly heal. And really just what this means is once you choose to take the path of the wounded healer for your own self, that's when the path of healing opens before you. So it's almost like an initiation. Connecting with your Chiron, and many of us do and don't even know that's what we're doing, but it's an initiation. And once you choose that, the whole universe conspires to help you, as Poelo Kahelo says. But that really is what this path of Chiron and working with this asteroid in your chart does. So, yes, that is a general place for me to start with this. It's a lot of information, but I would love to be able to answer any questions. And sorry if I rushed through that. I hope I didn't. Just wanted to make sure I got everything in there. So yeah, if anybody has any questions about Chiron.
Where is Chiron currently? What sign and degree?
It's in Aries right now. It's been transiting through Aries for the past 2 years almost, I would say.
Would you happen to know the degree?
No, I don't know it offhand because it's only, yeah, I don't know the degree offhand.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name's Kerry. Thanks, that was really interesting. I just wanted to ask a question. If my Chiron is in my 8th house and it's in Taurus, can you offer me a small snippet of advice?
I mean, I would say Taurus is really about self-worth. It is ruled by Venus. It has a lot to do with our needs and our physical needs being met. So there's some sort of experience when you were younger, and of course, you have to kind of go back to that place. But there's some sort of experience when you were younger where there was some sort of neglect for your own physical needs, your senses, it's something you needed. And also very often people with Chiron and Taurus, their purpose is about building their self-worth in this lifetime. And that can be very difficult. And then it being in the 8th house, that's about healing and transformation. So that's kind of like interesting, because that's kind of saying, if you want to transform, you have to heal this. Of course, I would be able to get deeper by looking at your chart, but Taurus is always about self-worth. It rules money, it rules our resources, it rules worth, like how we value ourselves.
Okay, thanks. That makes a lot of sense for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How do you determine your house? I'm only seeing how to find your sign online. Oh, you would have to go to your chart. You would have to look at your birth chart. And Chiron is a key, so it's the shape of a key. And whatever house it's in, it'll show up there in your birth chart. So there's a great website to go to called Astrodensed, and then you can like look up the asteroid, and it will show on your chart wheel where Chiron falls in your house placement. Oh, okay. So Chiron's in a sign for almost 50 years, so it's quite generational. So like if it's in the sign of, let's say, Taurus, it's going to be there for quite a long time. That's why some astrologers place more emphasis on the house, because that will personalize it more for you. But the sign is very important because, again, it's an energy that you're here to master and incorporate. I don't know how fast it travels.
Do you want me to ask a question?
Whoever has a question, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I use the raised hand thing. So forgive me if I don't say this correctly. So Chiron is in my 7th house, which I believe rules relationships, but please expand if you have that. And then is the sign that rules the 7th house, is it Libra, or is it personal to my chart? Okay.
Oh, it's personal to your chart. Like it'll
okay,
say
so Gemini.
So your Chiron's
rules
in Gemini?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at the 7th house. That's a great question. Okay. It's always important in astrology, no matter what we're talking about, to remember there's always an axis. So if your sun, let's say your sun's in the 7th house, you always want to remember what is the opposite axis point of the 7th house. It's the 1st house. So the 7th house and the 1st house are connected, okay?
My sun happens to be in my 7th house.
Right. So that means, so Chiron is in your house of relationships, right? There's a lot to look at when you're looking at Chiron, right? So I already know, yes, it's in your house of relationships, partnerships, how you show up with other people, your intimate partnerships, marriage, etc. Why it's there, you can obviously like begin to go back and probably look at your parents' relationships to start with, or the relationships that you saw around you. But what's so important about that is it's opposing your 1st house. So it's not just that it's in your 7th house, it's completely also affecting your 1st house, which is your sense of self, you. And I would say with the Chiron in the 7th house opposing the 1st house, there is going to be a theme of deservingness, of receiving that, feeling worthy enough for that, of experiencing that, of having fears behind that, of not feeling safe there. Obviously, like your own personal history, I really wouldn't be able to completely put it together without talking to you. But this isn't just about your relationships. This is very much about you, your sense of self, and that there's pain, and relationships can bring that up. You can enter relationships and they can really trigger that for you. You can have partnerships with people who can be hurtful, but then you can also have partnerships as you're healing with people who can be healing as well. So the self is very important.
Sounds on brand.
When it comes to your seventh house, the self is the most important, because the seventh house is the reflection of you. Yeah.
Is there anything you would add about Libra? Or I'm sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding. That was my original question, and you said it wasn't. That's isn't. I said Gemini is in my seventh house.
Oh, Chiron will be in a sign, so you would have to look at your birth chart, and it should say the sign that it's in.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know unless you let me know the sign that it's in.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. Oh yes, absolutely. Hi, Alex. You can unmute. Hi.
Hi. This was really interesting. Thank you so much. I guess my question's like more general, like what are some like methods you would suggest to like work with Chiron? I mean, so you're saying to like take clues by looking at the house placement, the sign and the aspects, but also the opposing house is significant as well. And then once you like have that information,
it's anything that's aspecting your Chiron.
Yeah,
so,
I'm looking at mine. I have like 2 hard aspects. So I guess I'm like, what do you do like once you have all that information? Like, what are you journaling? Some like how are you working with Chiron, I guess?
Oh yeah, sure. That's a great question. So when I work with people on their Chiron, it's usually I usually work with people more than once on their Chiron, because as I said before, it's a very deep thing, and people who want to work on it, they want to like break through with it. So there's so many things you can do. But the place that I really go to always, the first place that I always go to is the inner child, and developing the relationship with the inner child based on what you're looking at in the chart, but also based on you and based on what the client is telling me about their I could say, oh, this shows that there was a coldness that you received from parents, and you didn't have your voice met, or you weren't heard. But I don't know the whole story without the person that I'm seeing telling me. So I put those two things together, and then we come up with the first thing that we come up with is the way to connect with the inner child. And one of the ways of that is to take things from what that sign is telling us. So as I said before, let's say it's Leo, and let's say it's in a certain house, and literally like break down ways that we can start talking to your inner child in the session, and then you would like commit to doing that every day and putting that out there in the world. So if somebody wasn't heard and it's hard for them to speak up, there's literally like different ways of immediately taking action on that in their conscious life, but then also in an inner child life. So if someone has issues with their third house, the Chiron's there of speaking and being heard, or Gemini is also the third house, and they have trouble asking for what they need. Let's say in a work environment, you can literally start to speak to your inner child in that moment at work. So you're kind of going down to the subconscious. But then when you take the action in the conscious world or at work and asking for it, you're integrating the conscious and the subconscious, and you're having your inner child trust you. So I always start with the inner child and the shadow. There's also lots of subconscious work that can be done. Just listening to any sort of hypnosis modalities that you can listen to on YouTube, and going to your inner child and talking to them about what it is in the chart that's saying you need. So it's like kind of, and then it's also creating the parent that you want to be for this part of yourself. Does that make sense? I mean, that's where I start.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because I'm just looking at mine and I feel like it's not like readily obvious to me like what my wounding might be. It's like kind of puzzling, but I think like you're pointing out that could be like something subconscious is a clue. Yeah.
I mean, there's also, again, a huge part of like working with your Chiron is what you're telling me, your own experience. And then we can also look at the chart and say, okay, that makes sense. So it's not just the chart. It's you know more even than the chart. The chart is a map. It's your blueprint. It's there to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. How does Chiron and the North Node work together? Okay. So the North Node in astrology is the North Node and South Node in a chart are points of destiny. And the North Node is almost like your destiny and what direction your soul is moving to in this lifetime. So if you have Chiron making aspects to any of the nodes in your chart, I mean, as I said before, it's like part of your soul path is to heal this and work with this, but at the same time, there's more of a pull from the transits that will almost force you to deal with it, because you have different transits to the North Node that are quite significant throughout your life. And when you have that, and if your Chiron's there, those transits will force you to heal it or confront it more so than maybe if it wasn't there.
What happens if the transits are to your South Node, and if your Chiron is conjunct your South Node, like mine is in Scorpio?
So that actually is a wound that doesn't just come from this lifetime.
Yeah.
That's something that's deep. That's something that you brought over in this lifetime to heal. And it's just as important as it being on the North Node. Just as important. Maybe even more.
I assume that the transits to that South Node are really, like you said, even more important. That's a true healing, karmic healing.
Yes, because you're releasing also on the South Node, but you came here with that.
Yeah.
So again, that's telling you a very different story than if that wasn't the case.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Jocelyn, hi, I see that your hand's up.
Yeah, hi. I seem to have Chiron in 2 houses.
Okay.
The 11th and the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the signs that are on the very outside, is that where they're saying what sign they're ruled by? There's actually several signs. I wondered about being in 2 houses and...
Yeah, does it say a sign in your chart?
So would the sign be on the very outside of the ring?
Well, it can be in between 2 houses, that's fine. And that would be more of like a conversation to figure out what's happening there. But usually I don't know if you're looking at there's an area where it says Chiron. It will say a sign. Does it say that?
So, Chiron in the 12th house is the closest sign to it is Pisces, but it's right on the very line where the 12th and the 11th house meet. And then the other place where it is in the 11th house, it appears to be near Aquarius.
Right. I mean, I would have to see your chart. That's no, I mean, based on degrees and everything, it's probably favoring one energy, but it's probably both, to be honest. I mean,
I was curious because it was in both houses.
Yeah.
I guess it was more
That's not a mistake. That's not a mistake. So like anything in your chart is not a mistake. it's your blueprint, like it's your soul's blueprint. So that's very meaningful that that is the case. So you're exploring not one modality, you're exploring two. So it's important to look at both the houses. If you can look at if you can look at the where it actually says Chiron, like sun, moon, if you can look at that and the sign that it's in, definitely focus on that, but focus on both the energies because they're energies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not one or the other in your case at all. It's both.
It's both. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one's near Pisces then, and one is near Aquarius.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm double whammied.
I would say that's double gifted.
Double gift. I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah, that's double gifted. You're mastering more than one thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Amy? Amy? Yeah. Okay. Amy?
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry. So my Mars and Jupiter are both in the opposite sign of my Chiron. And incidentally, I just found out that my Chiron is in the 5th house and my Venus is in Leo. So like,
yes, yeah, that's
am
what I'm
I
talking
just-
about. It's a story, it's a map.
Yeah.
And wherever your Chiron is, this is another thing. It's a theme through your whole birth chart. Your whole birth chart is based on this, really.
Yeah.
So so when you start to work on that, you're activating your Venus and Leo. You're activating those houses. You're activating that energy. That's what you're doing. You're lighting up yourself. So yeah, like, yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, yes, that's very true. Yeah.
So like,
yeah.
the fact that I saw that and just had a thought of like, oh, I better work on this.
I mean, well, so what sign is your Chiron in?
My Chiron is in Taurus. It's in Taurus in the 5th house.
Okay. So
My Mars and Jupiter are both in Scorpio, but they're in different houses. I think Mars is in the 11th and Jupiter's in the 10th. And then the Venus is in Leo, I think, in the 8th.
Right. So I definitely say that like 5th house Leo energy is quite important. But yes, you have other houses that are opposite. It doesn't even mean it's making aspects. It doesn't even have to make aspects. It's just that you have that axis of 5th, 11th house Leo energy going on. So yeah, you know, you don't have to work on it, but it probably would be really lovely for your growth and your chart.
So my lifelong commitment issues are just really out there on the chart.
I would have to see the chart, but again, nothing is by mistake, and there are no bad placements. So it's like a grid that you put together before you came here.
Yeah.
Your higher self. It's a higher consciousness. So there's no mistake and there's nothing bad about it. But it's very perfected, like perfectly, it's designed perfectly.
Yeah. So it's sort of like, it's not, so they sort of can exist like separately of each other, like different things on a plate versus like everything kind of smushed together on the plate.
Things exist separately for us with the chart until you start to work on different parts of the chart and then you integrate them and it's energy. And then it's kind of like, you know, you get to that point where you're working maybe on this area of your chart or you're working on this area. And then what happens is you have those aha moments where you're like, oh my God, that's how it all fits. So yeah, I mean, I definitely still look at it separately and I'm working on this area of my chart of this. And then somehow, you know, of course, when we have transits, it's going to help us more too. But I start to have moments where I'm like, oh my God, I understand why what this squaring is doing and why it's been so difficult, because it's connected to this and it's me applying this. And so, yeah, it's okay if you're looking at it separately. It won't always be that way if you know.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, are there any more questions?
I was just gonna add,
Yeah.
I was just gonna add that Chiron is in Gemini, and it's very close in degree, if this is relevant, to Mercury and Saturn, and it's in the first house. My first house is Sag, and there's something else I was going to say. I just wanted to see if you would add anything, but if you feel like complete, then Uranus is in my first house, is what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it sounds like I would have to see like your chart. But it sounds like to me, from what you're telling me, it sounds like there's an aspect of liberating the self from something it's kind of been chained to, in regards to the wound that you have with Uranus in the first. And everything else I didn't quite see in my mind, but that's a big deal. So you're probably gonna, maybe get off this call and then maybe like look at your chart tomorrow and be like, wait, this, and this too. That's how it works. That is how the whole thing is sort of constructed for you. But I would say with Uranus in the first, there's something about the self wanting to liberate itself in this lifetime.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I have Leah Diaz. So you mean that Chiron can be both the pain and the healer? Yes. So it's like the pain that we're feeling, that we're going through, let's say during a really intense Chiron transit, or, just on a daily basis, something we struggle with. If it's coming from that area in our chart where our Chiron is, it's that pain that brings us to want to heal ourselves. So it's almost like the pain can be turned into medicine. That poison can be turned into medicine. So yes, the pain and the healer are the same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with Chiron. Great. Does anyone have any more questions before I log off or before we end the class?
I just have oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I've asked a bunch of questions, but I was going to ask.
Your Chiron's in Gemini, right?
Yeah.
That's good. Gemini's supposed to ask questions and be curious.
I ask lots of questions. My question is related to the shadow. If the direction I have been taking is looking at the inner child, and I have also been kind of looking at the shadow as well. And the things that come up for me, mostly I identify anything that comes up for me in my field of vision in my life that kind of I have a little bit of a disdain for. I kind of lean into it a little bit more. That's how I've been approaching the shadow right now. Is there anything that you would add, or like how maybe you would connect? Yeah.
If you can do any form of hypnosis, so like you literally could just go on YouTube and listen to an inner child hypnosis guiding meditation, because when you're in a hypnotic state, you're like almost like 75% more connected to the subconscious. So what comes up from there is very important. So I mean, that's what I have been doing for myself, and it's been amazing. And you don't have to pay for that. You can go on any YouTube and download inner child hypnosis, inner child meditation, and go down there, because you're going down into your subconscious, and that's where your shadow is. There's things that will come up that you don't even know that are going to come up. You don't even know you feel that way about yourself. That's very powerful.
Okay, I'll give that a shot.
Great. I think someone else had a question.
Hi, it's Kerry here. It's just a general question about astrology. Sorry. What do aspects and conjunct mean?
Oh, okay. So aspects are basically the conversations and the relationships that the planets have with each other. So if your sun is in the sign of Sagittarius and it's at, a specific degree, and your moon is in the sign of Sagittarius at the same degree, they're making a conjunction. So a conjunction is like they're holding hands tight. They're the same, they're unified. So that is what a conjunction is. And aspects are the different types of relationships that your planets can have with each other. So there's harmonious aspects and more challenging aspects in your chart. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Can you, sorry, I typed the question in the chat a couple of times, but it got buried. But can you just speak to the second house and what having Chiron in the second house may mean, or how to question that internally?
The second house is ruled by Taurus.
And your Chiron might be in Taurus too. So that's like double lesson.
Yeah. The second house is about, second house in Taurus, the theme is worthiness, value, self-worth, money, our resources, the foods we eat. It's also beauty, it's our senses, it's the clothing we wear, like the materials. So second house is about if our Chiron's there, it's about our Chiron's relationship with our value, how we value ourselves, our relationship with money, abundance, scarcity, self-worth, what we're putting into our bodies. It's connected to Venus. So those are some of the things that the second house, rules. And depending on the person, that can come up in many different ways. You can have someone who's a billionaire who has Chiron in the second house because they're terrified of not having enough money, so they work their whole life to make sure they have it. Or you can have someone who has Chiron in the second house who can't ask for a raise, even though they really deserve it, and doesn't have a very good relationship with money because deep down inside doesn't feel they deserve that. So these are some of the ways that it comes up. It can mean that somebody in your family or your parents or your ancestors maybe had a toxic relationship with money or value, or were again, could have been greedy or could have been on the low self-worth. But the point is, you took in all of that information into your subconscious and your inner child, and now it's creating situations for yourself in your life, but you don't even connect it to that, to why that's happening. Right. So so that's what the second house, some of what the second house represents.
Thank you. Yeah, it seemed so similar when I was reading about it to the actual Chiron and Taurus. So I wasn't, okay, that's interesting. It makes total sense. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay, so I think our time is up, but I had a really great time with everyone tonight, and I hope that this, made you understand more the Chiron as well, the Chiron placements. And I'm also going to be doing mini Chiron readings as well. So Rashina's going to put that in the link down below. So if you're interested in discovering a little bit about your Chiron, a general introduction to it, or you want to maybe go a little deeper if you already know a general introduction about it, I definitely would love to have that experience with you and go deeper and look at more of the aspects and more of your personal story to connect it with your own Chiron placement. Just because your own Chiron placement it's your gold. So just remember that's almost like the gold part of one of the golden parts of your chart. But yeah, it was really nice to connect with everyone. And I hope everybody has a very high vibrating week.
Bye.
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 Thank you.